Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I analyse games using the mindset of speedrunning and look at the game from three perspectives. First the casual experience, which is how most people first play the game. Next the speedrun experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. And finally the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description and chapters on the video. Today we're looking at Mercs for the Master System. This was released across various different systems, but knowing me, I love the Master System version. Before we get stuck into it, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone watching. We've reached a huge milestone, 499 subscribers. I'm so thrilled. So I just really appreciate everyone that has subbed to the channel and all the comments that have been left on the videos. It's been really cool to see people trying out new games they haven't heard of before, or people already involved in the community getting around the game and reflecting on, I guess, the history and some of the tech used. It's been really great to see, and I always appreciate it. Alrighty, let's talk about Mercs. This was one that I had as a kid growing up. I don't know why we had this game as a kid, because it's like a run and gun shooter sort of game, but I'm assuming my parents just had it and it got passed on. You get two options for firing. You've got your normal ammunition there, and you've got these three like mega bomb things that you can use, and generally those mega bomb things are best saved for the boss. For example, the bosses look like this plane here, and it's really cool that they managed to pull something like this off on the Master System. My theory is they use the background tile graphics to make a sprite that looks this big, but it's just really cool that it works at all. You get through the bosses like so, and then that's basically the level done. The thing that was really appealing about this game as a kid, it was actually easy enough to make some progress in. Unlike, I guess, games on the NES of this genre where they are ridiculously hard, I feel like the Master System ones tended to be a little bit easier, although I'm not sure if that's just an effect of me growing up with them and being more used to them. It's got a pretty robust upgrade system. You have cool features like being able to ride in the car here, and the benefit of riding in the car is you can go over like landmines without taking damage, which is really good. But also you've got different weapons that you can sort of upgrade here and there. Now with all the different weapon upgrades you can get, this one that looks like a P is definitely the absolute best. As soon as you get this, don't let it go, just use it for the rest of the game. It is so good. Much like the spread in Contra, which conveniently has the same pattern, that's also pretty good. This one's also pretty good. Funny about that. And as a kid, I literally thought these were peas because I probably just had like peas for dinner and then went and played Mercs. I don't know what they're actually supposed to be. So the game overall is actually pretty short, but most of the levels are memorable, like this one where you get to ride in a boat and go across the water and all that. And probably the hardest bit of the game is this bit where you fight the train as a boss. So with this boss you can't just keep hitting it with your missiles until it dies and then not worry about taking damage, because you actually have to avoid damage all the way leading up to it. The other tricky thing about this level is actually the time limit. I don't know why, but they made the time limit really low on this one. Once you get used to it though and you know what you're doing, you focus more on like avoiding the projectiles than actually hitting the boss, you're usually fine. And that's pretty much what this game has to offer. As kids we were actually able to beat it because the difficulty was just at that right sweet spot level, and it's a fun little 10-20 minute game if you like this kind of genre. I would definitely recommend picking this one up. Alright, so now we'll move on to looking at the speedrun. You'll notice the Master System is currently the most popular with the most number of active players. So in a rare case, I'm actually not being biased, the Master System one is pretty active at the moment. I also realised upon recording this that I never submitted my time to the leaderboard. It's an 852, which slots in around 11th place. And part of the reason you might see so many people that run this is it was actually in the Master 8 race, which I've talked about a couple times on this channel, but essentially it was this big race of 8 Master System games. There's me in the bottom left playing it among a whole bunch of others, and it was really fun to have this game included, because we actually got to beat the whole game as one of the challenges, unlike some games in this race where you only get through a few levels before it gets a bit too long. So the Master 8 race is where a lot of these times got recorded onto the leaderboards. That was about a year ago now, but there's been a big resurgence over the last couple of days, which has been really cool to see. Now before we get stuck into the run itself, I want to point out something unusual. These top two times are done on the PAL version of the Master System. Now the PAL version usually runs slower at 50 frames per second, but for Mercs something different happens. Alright, so normally a Master System and a lot of NTSC consoles will run at 60 frames per second. So 60 of these little red ticks will get you up to 1 second there. If your player starts at point A, then they will end up at point B after 60 frames of normal movement speed. And the movement speed is usually constant for each frame, so that's just 1 fraction of the second there. The question is, what happens if this game instead runs at 50 frames per second, like in PAL regions like Europe or Australia? So these blue ones are the 50 frames per second tick, and if the developers don't do anything to adjust the timing there, they're not going to hit point B there. Instead, you'll need to go a little bit longer until you actually hit 60 frames, and then point B will instead be hit after 1.2 seconds. So 1.2 seconds of movement on PAL gives you 60 frames, and without any adjustment, that's why PAL is slower. For every 1 second of movement on NTSC, it instead takes you 1.2 seconds to get there on PAL. But the way that Mercs solves this is instead of giving you a constant movement speed per frame, they give you a constant movement speed per second. And regardless of what frame rate you're playing at, it's only going to take you 1 second to do that, or 1 second of movement speed. In a sense, you can think of this as like the player is actually moving faster per frame on PAL to exactly compensate for the different frame rate of NTSC. Now, Mercs isn't the only game that behaves like this with PAL and NTSC, and a really classic example is Super Mario Bros. 1. So 454 is the limit for NTSC, but you can actually get 451 on PAL, and the reason for that is the physics are different. Because they sped Mario up to accommodate for the frame rate, you can actually do the full flagpole glitch on pretty much any flagpole and save yourself a whole bunch of time like this. And it's important to note the reason for that is, if you want him to move the same distance in 1 second, you do actually have to speed him up every frame, otherwise PAL is going to run slower, like most old games do. Another example of this is Banjo-Kazooie on PAL, where you're sped up enough to compensate for the frame rate. So that allows you to do something called a bit clip in Banjo-Kazooie, where you sort of clip through the floor. The spacing doesn't quite work on NTSC, but with PAL, the exact spacing of the jump due to the speed up is the right spacing to clip through the floor. But with most games, especially older games, PAL and NTSC is not compensated for, so they pretty quickly run out of sync, and NTSC tends to run a lot faster than PAL. Unfortunately, this means living in a PAL region and trying to do speedrunning can be pretty brutal, since you have to get your hands on NTSC hardware from America or Japan, but it's just part of the game, and over the years I've managed to collect quite a bit of NTSC hardware that works. But I guess the cool thing is, if you want to run Mercs, PAL would be optimal, so if you have your old PAL Master System, definitely give it a go. And although I'm not exactly sure why this is true, my theory for why Corbett may have run on PAL is because PAL runs at a slower frame rate, so it would lag the game less in Mercs. So lag does slow down the player in this game, but since PAL's only trying to hit 50 frames per second, that's less of a hard threshold for it to hit than 60 frames per second. Alrighty, so now we'll look at the run itself. This is the recent world record in 8:24 by Corbett. So we can see a pretty straight path through the level here, just going up towards that boss there, and Corbett's going to save the 3 bombs for the boss fight here. Alright, now we need to talk about bosses in this game. The absolute brutal thing about the first boss is, if you just use like your normal gun on it as if you'd used up all your missiles, you actually can't deal damage to this boss. The only way around this is getting the PAL power-up earlier on in the game, and that does upgrade your normal gun weapon. If you do get the power upgrade, you will deal some damage to the boss here, but it is still pretty slow, so you're going to have to use those Mega Bombs to deal damage. Now, you would think the boss would be pretty easy to deal with. Starts at 60 health. If it comes onto screen like so, a Mega Bomb will deal it down to 35, and then 10, and then done. So dealing about 25 at a time. But Mercs is weird. If you're a little bit too eager on your Mega Bomb and you do it right as the boss comes on screen, it doesn't even work just when its nose is on screen. So you really need to make sure when you come across this boss that you do wait till it's on screen enough, because if you try and do it early, you'll actually waste one of your Mega Bombs and actually won't be able to kill it. Now with the first boss, that's sort of okay, because you sort of just wait until the boss is on screen to deal damage, but the second boss gets a lot weirder. You can wait till it's fully on screen so that you can hit it, and then you can just pop 3 bombs and you get it down to 3 health there, and that's fine. But if you're not entirely optimal and you wait a little bit too long and you pop your 3 bombs, you only get it down to 39 health, and then you do have to finish the rest off with your normal gun. And we run into the same issue if you're too eager, so if I pop the bombs here, I'm only going to get it down to 45 health. So what's actually happening is the amount of damage you deal is dependent on how much of the boss is on screen. It's so weird. So if I pop the missile right there, I get it down to 198. If I wait a little bit longer, 180. And if I wait until the boss is completely on screen, down to 147. So runners need to get a really good feel for this, popping missiles as soon as you get that, and then just finishing off the rest with the normal shot here. And you can make that shot a bit more powerful with the power upgrade. But without having this RAM watch view, it's very hard for runners to actually get a feel for this, especially with limited documentation on the Master System version of the game. Hopefully this video helps. Anyway, let's get back to Corbet's run. So Corbett takes a pretty standard strategy of waiting for the plane to be on screen and then as early as possible popping those 3 missiles. It doesn't change the damage that you do to the plane dependent on how much of it is on screen, unlike the later level bosses there. So Corbett can just do it as early as possible without really worrying about the exact space in there. And then come into level 2 and pick up a power upgrade for the gun. That's going to be really, really useful to have. Now we'll just mention having the power upgrade doesn't help on this boss in particular. You can see it's sort of dealing 1 damage at a time there, versus without the power upgrade it is still going to be dealing 1 damage at a time. But the power upgrade does help in later levels. So Corbett has a good understanding of how the boss works here. We can see using the time where it's coming on screen to do the normal gunshots, and then the time where it's fully on screen to pop those 3 missiles. Sorry, mega bombs. I keep saying missiles. But yeah, that's mission 2 done, and then we move on to the 3rd one. Third mission is a very important one. So we take out that first structure with a mega bomb, and the reason for that is we're about to get a much more powerful gun here, so you might as well use your mega bomb in the space where you would have had the weaker gun. This was that spread shot that I talked about before that looks like the peas, and it is super, super powerful. We use up all the mega bombs there because the boss is pretty quick to kill with that little pea shooter thing. Now that we got the pea shooter, the game is going to become a lot easier. And if you're playing this casually, grab that pea shooter and do not let go. Just hold on to it forever. We grab another power up, which is going to make the pea shooter stronger. And then that helps us do damage a lot quicker to this boss. So if we look without the power upgrade, we're dealing like 3 damage-ish per hit with the pea shooter. I think it's actually 1 hit per pea that hits the boss. If we did get the power upgrade though, then we're now dealing 6 damage per shoot. So it doubles your damage output. And the reason we're using the pea shooter over missiles in this boss is because missiles really, check it out, only deal, what's that, like 27 damage, which is not that fast compared to just slamming the pea shooter button there. Because the reminder is you have to stop shooting to actually fire the mega bomb there as well, so it actually does slow you down, and mega bombs will probably be just slower for this boss. I will also mention that we did need the power upgrade in level 2. So the power upgrade stacks, so even if you get the power upgrade from this level but you didn't get the level 2 one, you're still only dealing 3 damage. It's not until you've got 2 power upgrades so far that you start dealing more damage to this boss there. So even though the level 2 power upgrade didn't help in level 2 itself, it does pay off absolutely here. And they progress through the whole game, so you just keep them for the rest of the game now. So yeah, back to Corbett's run, you can see you do have to wait a little bit for the boss to appear on the screen here. But once the boss does appear, you can just fire diagonally and then forward and then left into the boss. You're trying to get all the P's to make contact there, so the first few shots may not deal the entire 6 damage, but they do deal them eventually. Alright, next level we have here is stage 4. Now, if you're playing this casually, you will get like a flamethrower upgrade here, and it's strongly recommended that you avoid that. The flamethrower is just terrible. You want to keep the P's through the rest of the game. I will mention at this point that there is a bit of mashing involved with the pea shooter. So the previous gun, like a few bullets would come out at once, but with the pea shooter, only one like set of 3 comes out at once. You have to get a feel for the mashing timing, because if you just do it really fast, it's actually not optimal. You've got to wait until the peas sort of all despawn before you can mash again. It makes it a very technical thing to optimize the pea shooter. I remember when we were doing the Master 8 race, I didn't know about this little shortcut here. You can totally just cut that corner and go through there, whereas previously as a kid I used to go all the way right and up and left all the way around across that bridge you're seeing just there. Definitely saves a lot of time for this level, and it was so cool for me to find that out when we were doing the Master 8 race and everyone was grinding this game down. Again with the boss here, we're using the pea shooter, but then waiting until the entire thing is on screen before using the bombs. Really important of that. Next level here, I always really like the isometric-y kind of view on the houses. It's just a little bit quirky. And Corbett's going to go out of the way to pick up this med-like little health healing thing there. This level you can take a lot of damage on, and actually if you die in this game, that is completely just game over, which makes it pretty brutal to play through this game casually. But the difficulty of the game is not too bad, so you can usually get through without dying. I think one other thing that I'll mention is that Corbett's trying not to shoot too often for the enemies there, because shooting would cause bullets to go on screen, which then would cause you a little bit of lag. So it's important to not do that, but then you're going to take more damage from the enemies as a result. So there's always a bit of a trade-off. Now this here is something I definitely didn't know as a kid. You can just shoot the little projectiles here to avoid getting hit by them in the train section. Normally I would be running around and avoiding them, and in fact I still do that in runs because I find it a bit easier than shooting them, but it is good to have the option here. You can see here Corbett's quite low on health, so this can be an extremely scary boss, and more often than not this is where you will die if you're playing the game casually. But firing up into the train bit actually saves a lot of time because you're dealing damage to it before you get to it and before you're in like the line of fire from the train. So it all works out pretty well in the end, and if you have the power upgrade on the pea shooter, that helps a lot as well. This is the last mission here, but it's a lot of the same kind of stuff. So you've got to sort of dodge the tanks there. Now with the tanks you can destroy the tanks and that will work, but Corbett's going to run around them a lot, but also be taking a lot of damage in that process too. And this part of the level can be scary because of those sideways turrets. They deal a lot of damage if they hit you, so you've definitely got to avoid those. There's also like a little health upgrade you can get there in that box, but it is slightly out of your way, so it's always the trade-off risk versus reward of whether or not to grab that one. And similar to the turrets, these like plane gun things deal you heaps of damage if you get hit by them, so you've definitely got to be careful there as well. So Corbett comes into the final boss here and just deals with it with the pea shooter there. You could use missiles on it, but we actually need the missiles for something a little bit later. The game ends with you intercepting this flight thing here, and it's a lot easier to deal with this with missiles rather than the pea shooter there. You can see sort of the propellers coming off, and then that's just where the run finishes. Timing finishes there when you come out of the plane there. And you can just see how short Mercs is. It's a really good little experience to play. Huge congrats to Corbett on grinding down this run. It's been really cool to see where this game has come, especially since it's been in the Master 8 race. Alright, now usually I like the TAS section to be pretty long in these videos, but unfortunately there is no TAS for this game. The closest we have is a TAS whip by Isotage. Now this does the first two levels of the game, and it does them pretty well in my opinion. You can see there's a lot of lag reduction going on, and that really is going to be the main tech in the TAS that's different to RTA. There's nothing like huge that changes between one or the other. Isotage waits the lowest possible time to do the bombs on that plane and then proceeds on to level 2. Now I have actually tried TASing this game myself because I really wanted to make an actual TAS before doing this review video, but believe me, I've tried TASing it and the lag is just unmanageable. Usually I can deal with lag, but the way that the lag behaves in this game is just something I've literally never seen before in a TAS setting, and it's just so wild and counterintuitive. So I'm not super confident approaching this game, and I couldn't really match what Isotage was able to do in this TAS whip either. So it wasn't just that I sort of gave up, it's just that I didn't have the tools needed to match what was here, and I wasn't going to do a TAS if I couldn't make it optimal. I'm sure with enough time sunk into it you could get an optimal TAS of this game, but the normal techniques you would use to optimize lag just don't really work in this context. So Mercs, it's a weird TAS game. Now this TAS whip was done on the NTSC version, and I'm presuming based on what I know about Corbett's PB that PAL may end up being faster, because not only does PAL speed up the movement in this game, it does also speed up the cutscenes in between levels. So it'd be really cool to see a Taz of this game one day, but unfortunately we don't quite have that yet. But this Taz whip is a pretty good start. That's going to be all for this video, and thanks so much for watching.